So most of you, not everybody, my name is David, and I'm a professor in school of architecture and architecture. So many years ago, when I was an undergraduate student, an old professor on a review said this really strange thing I've never said that really great architects come in only one of two varieties, and there's no middle ground. He said some great architects are mean, self-serving, pinheaded weasels, whose smallness of spirit knows no lower limits. Actually, he didn't say weasels, he said an anatomical like the weasel suit. The other great architects, and there's not many, he said, are people of such remarkable kindness and generosity that you can't believe they function, given the stresses and demands of their lives, beyond a deep commitment to their work. The former, he said, were that way because they sought to protect something brittle from reasonable examination by others. The latter, he said, were that way because they had something genuine to share. Or maybe he said they wanted first and foremost to share, and so they had something genuine to offer. We're happy that Tod and Billie, two of the most highly respected architects working today, have shared with us at the School of Architecture for so many years. Tod and Billie were, after the collapse of the High Model, really the first American architects to remake through the evidence of their designs an argument. Tod and Billie were, after the collapse of the High Model, really the first American architects to remake through the evidence of their designs an argument that's today simply a ground rule that a building is a material act to which consideration must be given. Their work, so widely published in the world, is well known for this particular consideration. But more fundamental to me is Tod and Billie's buildings is an underlying humanistic concern, an insistent desire to make an habitation and experience as rich as possible. I think their mastery of material flows from this deeper dimension. Tod and Billie have taught here with us for a number of times, and year after year, they've offered one of the most coveted professional residency program internships to our students, beyond taking a fair number of our graduates into their On paper, it says that they've officially participated with the residency program since 1997, but that can't be true. Tod and Billie first taught here in the early 1980s, when Larry Dahl, I think, arranged for them to come as visiting critics. It was the early 1980s. I was working for their office at that time, and shortly after they came back from New York City, they hosted their first UT students to come to the office. It was Tom and Alice. Tom, yeah, I remember it was Tom and Alice. I like Tom. Having him in the office meant that I was, while he was there, not the most squirrely person in the office, which I'm eternally grateful to Tom for, and to the University of Texas School of Architecture. Okay, just to give you some sense, Tom, if you're there, I'm sorry, I'm kidding. To give you some sense of how long Tod and Billie have been sharing with us, at that time I was still an undergraduate student. Would you please include in your welcome an extra measure to express the School of Architecture's deep gratitude to Tod Williams and Billie Tsien.
Thank you. It's incredible to see this room so full, and I apologize to those who are standing out back. Thank you for being here. If you need to escape, we certainly understand. It has been an amazing run of years, and we have loved every connection we've ever had with UT. And even here today. So I just want to say it's a huge honor to be here with you. We know that our studio actually has more UT people in it than any other school, and it's thanks to your great program and your great quality students that you continue to push out and push some of them to New York. So it's a thrill. Thank you.
So we're going to show 6 projects today, and we're going to move through them fairly quickly. But what we're trying to address with the projects that we're showing is that our work really comes very much from a sense of a place. And so everything we do, we try to make very specific to the place where it is. And obviously there's a kind of consistency that runs through the work. But we are really trying to think about place. And then if you think about place, you have to think about time, because you're looking at those other buildings that are around you that you are touching and holding hands with. So our buildings are also looking back at time, even as they're trying to find their current place in time. And as well, we always build thinking that buildings will last 100 years. Well, now we know sometimes they don't last 100 years. But as a very, very good friend sent us a quote from Borges, and he said, all buildings are built on sand, but when you build a building, you have to believe that you're building on rock. And so we still believe every time we work on a project that we're building on rock.
I'd also say that another aspect of this work, which is about place, it's about the people for whom we work and the people who work in our studio. And I think of the people who build the buildings. And so it is, in fact, we're trying to be as specific as we possibly can be. We believe that every single person counts in this. The first project we'll show, and Billy will tell the story better than I, actually has its home in Marion, Pennsylvania, at the Paul Cray building.
So this was a collection that was amassed by Dr. Albert Barnes. And he essentially built a kind of house museum. That was what Paul Cray designed on this site, which was originally an arboretum. So the building has a sort of neoclassical presence. And the collection was hung in a very idiosyncratic way. He had a very strong idea about teaching people to see. And so the way the paintings are hung are always with a symmetrical line. They're bilaterally symmetrical. So interspersed between these paintings are hardware, and each painting on either side of the dividing line always has a visual relationship to each other.
And so he wanted to hang these things and realized you were seeing them as an ensemble. You're seeing the whole wall, but then you're beginning to see elements in the wall talk to one another. He didn't believe you needed to know about the art in order to appreciate it. It was issues of relationships and form, light, and color.
So there was a lot of controversy about the moving of this collection, but in the end, the collection did move to downtown Philadelphia. And you can see there is this sort of, the dots you want to...
Well, it's clear that you can see this green axis, and we'll talk about it, actually also designed by Paul Cray. So we come back here to talk to someone, a guy named Jacques Grevier, which was the idea in Philadelphia, taking an idea of the city beautiful that we heard from, that occurred in Chicago, and actually is using the principles of the Beaux-Arts that we were in existence in Paris. And they came up, these are the architects back in the 20s when this idea was built. At the bottom of the model is the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and they had the idea that this Franklin Parkway would have a series of cultural buildings on either side. And actually it was largely built. But by 1929, the crash occurred and no more buildings were built on the Parkway. But by that time, I can't see very clearly. We have a series of buildings. This one up here on the upper right is the public library. Over here, Billy, is the museum. We see the PMA back there. And there's a building, this small building is the Rodin Museum, also designed by Paul Cray and Jacques Grevier, which is a collection of Rodin's work. So this is all just before the UT campus is being designed.
So it's really the great civic thoroughfare of Philadelphia. So when we went to look at the original location in Marion, we felt very much that this is a kind of gallery in a garden, because you walked through the garden and you found this most amazing treasure trove of paintings.
In fact, Barnes' wife, Laura Barnes, was interested in arboretum and created an arboretum around the collection that Barnes had, which would be here. So we saw it as a gallery and a garden, and many of the works were impressionist works, and they were about gardens and about looking from the inside to the outside. But at that time, only 3 windows of the entire building actually would be open to the garden, even though windows are all around the building. So you were both looking at these paintings, divorced from the garden, but you were in the garden.
It was also an incredibly exhausting experience because when you went to look at these paintings, we're so used to seeing, these singular objects on a white wall. And instead, you were looking at 15 or 20 pieces, and you were trying to sort of parse the relationships between one side and the other side. And it felt like you were in some kind of crazy art tennis game because you're always going back and forth, back and forth. So we thought about that. We thought about where it was, and we thought that it not only needed a sense of the garden, but it needed a sense of sort of serenity, so you could escape from the intensity from time to time and decompress. So this was a sketch that we brought with us when we went to talk with the trustees.
Actually, this was we brought this and a couple of other things to the interview. Other architects, some of them were Tom Maine and Skirkanich Diller and Prophet of the Nail. Some of them brought models. We brought just very, very few things. This was a thought. Gallery and a garden. Could you do a garden in a gallery as well as a gallery and garden? And we brought this model, which is no bigger than this. And in its collapsed position was a solid block of wood. We opened it up and inserted these elements, which is to bring light into the gallery system and to give a sense of reflection and connection to the outdoors.
So the wooden box actually represented the Cray box gallery because in order for the collection to move, certain requirements had to be met. Now, those requirements were that the ensembles had to stay the same and the sequence of galleries had to stay the same. So we're really starting with that as a beginning point. And we looked at it and we thought, well, it's also a symmetrical plan, so could you take the last 3 galleries and sort of move them to the side and insert that sense of a garden or that sense of green?
Actually, this was a later model, but the idea was in the collapsed position, these 3 windows were together, and there was a varying wall, and we said, let's insert a garden in one place and a place to study in the other, because the experience was so intense, and it's not a museum, but it's a study collection, that there was no real way to study or reflect on what you were doing. We will fast forward to the kinds of drawings we showed. This is along the way. You can see we do present hand-drawn drawings. These are the galleries. This is the garden that's been inserted. This is an area in the entrance that had to all remain intact on 2 levels. We suggested at that time another garden. Actually, this was a study center. I'm sorry, we reversed it too. And then there was the other stuff, changing exhibits and entrance. We suggested that you would actually walk through the garden to get into the space. We wanted to delay the sequence. And these are about 10 different models were the models, the kinds of models we bring in about this size every 3 or 4 weeks as we develop the building. And we showed these drawings. These are my drawings, exploring the idea of a light box and thinking of some ideas which were panned out and others which didn't. So it's better for us to show the process and to have the client as a partner in the design as we go forward. Here we are, really at a rendering much later, nearly the final rendering, actually by Lori Olin, our landscape architect.
So on the site, which is on the Franklin Parkway, there's a kind of civic gesture, which is this very, very long table of water. And then there are the existing London plane trees, which are, I don't know, 120 years old.
90 years old, from 1929.
And then there is a kind of procession. You have the pointer.
They do. Okay. So the procession could mean that you, instead of walking into this neoclassical building on axis, in fact, the collection looked into a garden, so we created a ha-ha with its garden in front. We left this alley here. The civic gesture, the table of water, sort of signifying the Beaux-Arts plan. And then one ascends very slightly through the grove of big or pines, and then walks along an alley of Japanese red maples, enters the building, so it's a delayed entrance. So we tried to slow everyone down. We wanted cabs to drop people off buses to drop people off here, cars to park, and people to delay the sequence coming in so that you would experience as much of the garden, which wasn't large as possible.
I think one of the things that we're interested in are buildings that allow themselves to be discovered slowly. And so one of the things I said as we were talking to students today is that as we continue in our work, we become less interested in making a statement and more interested in the experience, a kind of interior experience as people slowly start to understand the building. But here you can see that it is both connected in certain ways, both in terms of the scale and the material to the buildings that exist on the Princeton Parkway.
I would say that we always want our buildings to belong, and I think that'll be a theme you'll see today. So this is a limestone building. The windows in the old barns had shades drawn and they were milk glass. We restored all of the windows. I think we actually made new windows. And you can see that they're symmetrically deployed as they look out over this ha-ha into an intimate landscape and then into the landscape of the lemon plane trees here. This is the image of the 140-foot long cable of water, kind of civic gesture where people can sit, put their hands in. The deodora pines, of which one walks. We'll talk about the skin a little later. And then there's a light box on top. This is the Platinum building. This light box is continuous solar panels and taking care of water. It's a very, very important aspect on the site. Cab dropping someone off in here, walking up along what appears to be a very solid limestone building with almost no expression, and then walking across the water and into the body of the building.
So when we tried to think about the exterior of the building, Cray's building in its proportions had these sort of horizontal, the three lines. And we started thinking about how do you take this essentially a neoclassical building and how do you weld it to this new building that we were putting on. And we started to think about the skin as a fabric. One of the interesting things about Barnes's collection is that he really he had a very serious collection of African art, and he was also interested in textiles. And actually, we're very interested in African textiles as well. So this sense of the kuma cloth, which is woven in strips and then sewn together, seemed to both speak to what was in the collection and became a way of wrapping and at the same time a way of recognizing these horizontal bands that existed in the gallery building.
This is candy cloth, this building building.
Oh, sorry.
So we come late to understanding what material there is, but we used lots of full-scale mock-ups, and here we were on the parkway while the building was being demolished, still trying to figure out what our facade would be and what the rain screen system would be, and here we explored different materials, really stainless steel as a rain screen, and then stone of different types. Two of these stones are the same, three of them come from different locations. We couldn't use an American limestone for a lot of reasons, and ultimately found our stone in Jerusalem. It's often called Jerusalem stone, but if one doesn't research that carefully, you realize that there's all sorts of possibilities. And so we went south of the Negev and actually found the quarries where stone was cut, and then went to the quarries and ultimately found the place where it then was dressed, and went there in Bethlehem and made a number of trips over, trying to find a way by which we could essentially use all of the blocks of stone, how they came out of the ground, and then make sure we had as little loss as possible and carve them wherever we could.
Well, we really didn't plan on hand carving them, but when we went to the place where the stone was dressed, we saw people there who were chiseling the stone. And so the chiseling of the stone was much more sort of organic, and you can see it on the right-hand side. I think Todd asked them whether they could chisel, make the marks in a straight line, and so they did. So then we decided we would use both of these stones.
And they said it wasn't terribly expensive. Unfortunately, it was being done by people who were paid little, but this was a very wonderful combination of Israelis and people who were Palestinian and working together to actually do the stone on the building. So it, of course, comes from far away, but it's transported once. And this is the basic, the idea of the stone facade later, that each of these is kind of a picture. We have no problem with them being quite rich and varied. When the sun hits or bleaches them out, they become more quiet, very moody.
One of the reasons that we wanted this stone is that we wanted, as I said, to both fit in. American limestone is very, very consistent, and it was too consistent for what we were looking for. So we wanted something that felt much more sort of inconsistent and richer and more diverse. And so, as Todd said, by accepting a really broad range of stone, rather than being very picky about it, it helps to keep the cost lower. So the whole sense is about coming into a garden, being quiet, dropping your shoulders, leaving the city behind. So one enters then into this lobby, and you look back at the garden through which you walked.
And you look down, and as Albert Barnes had done, we added details that came from the idea of an African fabric being woven. This is a drawing Billy did, and it was made in a mosaic by actually people in Brooklyn. It's called a liar's cloth.
It's based on that.
It's a sort of riff on the liar's cloth. We want places for people to stop. We found fabrics from Africa, worked with Noel to make couches here. This great space came relatively late in our design, which was the idea of a great room, a room that was bathed in natural light that would precede your entrance into the gallery. So one is walked in here and then walks diagonally across the space and enters the galleries here, or walks straight through this past the vestibule, which appears to be a monolith, and goes outside. We took the flooring there and added an Ipe flooring that, yeah, here they are outside. So we wanted to make sure that at least two places in the museum or the galleries you could literally step out at any time.
So in a certain way, and these are some images of the changing exhibit gallery, we were trying to make something that, on the one hand, appeared to be quite simple, but when you went inside, had a layered richness to it. This is actually the entry into the gallery space. So here we once again used a hammered metal, which is based on a decorative pattern that is also an African pattern, and these doors shut. But you can also see that the galleries now, because of an advanced glass technology, are able to keep their shades up most of the time.
So actually the galleries are, everyone says they're exactly as they were. They are in every technical way, but they aren't in any real way. I mean, the baseboard is precisely the same height. The paintings are hung exactly the same distance. Now they're in a proper conditioned space, and we've hidden lighting. At the same time, we have various shades to allow natural light to come in and for people to look to the garden when they're even inside among the paintings.
So one of the great things is that paintings are now lit. So a lot of people think everything has been cleaned, but really nothing has been cleaned. And there's a great story because the people that were involved in making and constructing this building were so dedicated because they were really making a place that their grandchildren to, that the workmen all got to line up and write their names on the sheetrock behind this Matisse, so that they could then come back and say,
well, as we did at the Folk Art Museum, we made a stainless steel plaque with every single person's name on it who worked on the project. So we believe that that sort of family that makes the building should be honored forever. Yeah, here we are. We've made full-scale mock-ups of certain rooms to explore the idea of light from above, because there hadn't been really light from above, and this is done in a parking lot. We also explored what it was to take traditional moldings and then to transform them in a way that made it a little bit more contemporary. We actually had to virtually go to school on that because we knew so little about moldings, having used so little in our lives.
There's actually two UT people in this picture.
No.
So this, yeah, as Todd said, we knew nothing about molding. So, we're contemporary architects, we don't use moldings. And the first thing we did was, we thought, oh, let's get rid of all the moldings, because we don't believe in moldings. And then when we got rid of all the moldings, the paintings looked really weird, because people were used to seeing them
That was a theoretical idea.
within the boundaries of these horizontal lines. And so we said it's really like if you looking at a friend and they shave off their eyebrows and suddenly their face looks like what happened to their face. And so we realized that we needed to recreate these lines, but we had a sort of saying that we kept on saying to ourselves, simplify and intensify. So we sort of started with these traditional moldings and tried to understand, why were they good? And what did they give you? And what did the shadows give you?
Yeah.
Besides hiding cracks, because it's more than that. So people always say to us, oh, we're so happy that you really recreated the galleries exactly as they were. And it makes us smile because every single detail was rethought and redone. So you can see the existing and the newer, which is a lighter wood, not wood windows, not metal windows, and looking once again at the burlap, simplifying the floor. So there are many, many subtle things that happen to change the space.
And then we changed the lighting through this mock-up. This also came relatively late to realize that we didn't want to light the paintings, we wanted to light the room. So we worked with Paul Morantz and then looked bouncing light into the spaces and then reinforcing it with artificial light. And so basically this is the system with all the rooms on the second level. This was a little study alcove we designed that was along the sequence. Remember I said that there was a space to sit and reflect or maybe have a classroom. This is that. This to the left is the garden that was inserted. And here we are in a sequence of galleries, so we're actually walking in a gap between a gallery, which is where I am, and the next gallery. And then here we are in the very lowest level, this is below grade, another garden that we can walk out to. Paul Cray also collected pots. These are Native American pots, and they were in the basement of his Barnes did. And so we wanted to animate the lower level and make sure it didn't feel like it's a secondary citizen. So we have a library down there. And then even the loading dock shields the outdoor garden that we talked about and reveals the light box. The second project is that we have two long ones. This one's a shorter one. This is a competition we won a number of years ago and was just finished 2 years ago in Chicago. It was a limited competition. It was on this site right here. You can see it outlined in red. The University of Chicago is largely to the north of this pleasance. This is a homestead and box idea from the early 20th century. And our building sits on one side looking over at the campus towers.
So it's on the south side of the Plaisance, and the primary campus is on the north side. And once again, it's a limestone building and limestone towers, which are quite solid. What they wanted to do was bring all of the arts together in one building and try to get the undergraduates to sort of participate in a parallel life to the very serious intellectual life that goes on at the University of Chicago.
So this was a diagram, this is a photograph of an idea, which is that there's a tower, and that there are towers in Chicago that were also set in the plane. So our idea was that the building is both a tower and a horizontal building. Horizontal because it was a utilitarian tower to in a way reflect the towers, not only the campus on the north, but the city that you could see in the distance. And so this is actually our competition model here, and our competition drawings. We won the competition, but we were, as every other person, way over budget, and had to reduce and simplify our project, and many of the ideas were not very good ideas. But they did like this idea of a tower of the arts, and Billie and I lived for 34 years in Carnegie Hall in a tower, and it was really a tower of the arts, and we thought that that was a wonderful way to live, where you were jumbling up different portions of the art community, from music to theater and so on. These are sketches.
Where the tower becomes more solid, and thinking about the towers across the way, and really only making windows where it made sense on the interior space. This whole thing was focused on, as I said, the idea of having fun with the arts, because Chicago is one of the campus T-shirts said University of Chicago, the place where fun comes to die. So we're hoping to reinvent this kind of sense of fun in this building. So more studies of the tower.
Yeah, don't believe in glass towers, but we solid towers. But how could a solid tower bring a lot of light? And how could you make a tower that you wanted to walk up rather than using an elevator? So this is a later model which shows kind of an industrial section here on the bottom, and then the tower more or less as it was ultimately built. The plan has a very, very complex set of elements. A theater here for 450, another one for 150, a black box theater, workshops, and a gallery through here, a cafe here, and painting and studios on this level, and a street that runs from the south side, connecting to the neighborhood a little bit in the future, to the north and across to the Plaza. And then also uses backup building. Okay, actually what you don't see is the former the former art complex, which is now used for writers. So actually this is quite a rich community of writers in residence and then artists in these buildings.
So Todd talked about the north-south connection that occurs on two primary levels, and then there's a vertical connection that occurs in the tower. So we're really sort of in these diagrams trying to say that there are two ways of moving, the horizontal and the vertical. And we're very interested in stairs. Todd particularly is obsessed with stairs. So the stairs, we were trying to make places where you might walk up 2 or 3 floors, maybe 2 floors, maybe 1 floor, but try to find people along the way so that you would be exploring this building.
And it is, even I haven't first we walk up and down the whole thing. The idea was that the fire stairs are of interest and value, and we under-elevated the building to encourage people to use the stairs, and the fire stairs are the primary movement. So this is the section, the building is completed, north-facing skylights with solar panels on the south side, and then green roofs, the building at night.
This is from the south side of the building. This is the rest of the
it sort of bugs me with only part of these sawtooth roofs that whole tent can get over that. So the building you can see is a tower. We've made it of limestone bricks that are 4 feet long, 4 inches thick, 4 inches deep, and they then are just stacked up as bricks. And we used an irregular limestone from Missouri so that it would make sure it wasn't too even. The stone is extremely even, and we like the richness of the texture of the stone. Looking down from the tower.
So there you see the courtyard that's made by the new building and the earlier older building, which was the studio.
Well, that's attached. It's already attached. And then the courtyard that's made a cafe. It's quite a rich. These are students who had an art fashion show. It's become a very, very rich and lively place. The fire stairs, we have 2 fire stairs to look outside, so you're quite aware of where you are, and people are aware of you as you move up and down. There are small lobbies, so that they're, even when they're not used, as this is the case, we feel intimate and they become quite jammed and lively. We use this felt system here. We'll talk about that in the class that we evolved.
So it really becomes a backdrop for student work. This is the larger auditorium, black box theater, and then a shop that works both as a theater set shop, and also there's a sculpture section where people are doing large-scale sculpture, and this is underneath those sawtooth skylights. So a lot of natural light comes into the large studio spaces.
And crit spaces in all the hallways and so on.
Yeah, so I think it becomes enlivened the more it becomes encrusted by student work. And here we used a kind of almost industrial felt, but it's a woman who started out making felt for clothing. And so it's felt that comes in sort of small pieces, so you can create imprecise, but you can create your own designs. And so we work to make a surface that would be sound absorbent and be very, very tough, but would help people to sort of orient their way through the building.
So this is a screening room and a very small vestibule to it. When you step outside, there's a kind of plate of the felt. This is one of the alcoves. I think there's a number there that shows you on the 8th floor, students sitting there, kind of just a place to rest if you're tired of walking up the stairs. We also played with the tiles, which we've worked on before, and I'm sorry we didn't discuss the felt in the previous project, but these tiles are working with Heath that we out of Sausalito County, California. We've been working with them over the years to see if we can get inexpensive but lively tiles. This was a tile that was double dipped, half partially dipped, as you can see with the black line, and then you can see experiments here.
This is another tile that's dipped in the other direction so that it's matte and glazed. And so we use these tiles in the vertical spaces because the light comes in and light reflects differently off the matte sections and the glazed.
So the whole building's poured in place concrete, the floor draws of dry ground, and then we try to animate the interior of the stairs. This is, again, the interior of the fire stair where you get kind of wonderful views down to the landscape below outside. Outside the performance room space at the very top. Actually, this is an art installation on the left side. And a number of places people are installing art throughout the building.
So this is the room up at the very, very top, and it's used as a classroom, and it's also used as a performance space. So this is the third project. This is in a very different place in Vermont. And at Bennington, it's a school that
75 years old.
sends students out to do public service. And so this is a series of buildings where students both decide where they're going to go when they go out to do their public service, and they also bring people in to focus on specific issues and questions. So it's also kind of seminar space.
They actually closed the school at this time of the year. It's closed because they save money on the heating and the students are not working, much as your program here. They do many different things out there. We could choose a site anywhere on this campus, this rural campus you see there on the left, over here. Very rural, and these were some of the sites they asked us to think about. We chose this one, which was exactly in the back of a student visual arts center near a pond, and actually had become a kind of dumping ground for the students' art project. Here's part of the site. This is the site under construction. We'll tell you that's the wonderful building called Ithaca. So this building, in a way, remediated both the pond, which had problems, and had this delivery section of the visual and performing arts center. So this is under construction. Early drawings, and once again, they're showing the very early drawings and ideas. Kind of a blurry idea, and blurry. Here we were bringing parking right up to the building. Thank goodness we didn't do that. But it shows that it was made of a series of different elements here. We just were talking about this idea of elements in the landscape. There were 4 elements at one time. We were playing with the idea of the program Billy built back. Here we've got people that drive in and park around the delivery area and park away from it so they would walk to the complex. It got quieter and simpler as we moved through the sequence. The buildings we thought would all be inverted so they could catch the snow, melt it, and then treat the water and then extend it, send it back cleaned into the pond. It's a little overly dramatic. It didn't work that way. Early sections, which shows really some absurd forms here that we were way over budget. And we kept getting quieter and quieter, and so that's still way over budget. Still over budget. That pool disappeared really. Getting closer. We had 3 elements here. This is the residences here. This was the student seminar building, and this was a building that still remained at the end. We wanted one building that was, in a way, offline.
So this is the final site model, and certain elements are kept. But some ideas, sort of bringing the water in through the center, still keeping 3 buildings much more quiet. plans. So you can see that there's a seminar room. It's a kind of little mini.
They needed seminar rooms. This is a seminar room. Another seminar room. A faculty lounge here. A very large seminar room, which is purposed to bring people in a kind of convocation. Student workrooms, much like a kind of 24/7 rooms, and then places for visitors to come and stay there because they were only could stay in the town, which was probably far away.
So when we were there, we were walking around and we went by Congregational's church, and we really loved the path. And the path was made out of pieces of marble from nearby quarries because it used to be a huge business in Vermont, sort of Vermont marble. And as the business died, the quarries closed, but the marble was so beautiful. So we found a person who had bought a quarry and then bought the sort of remainders of all these other quarries that went out of business. And we saw these buildings there that were dry-laid marble sort of storage buildings, and thought how beautiful it was to see the variation in the marble, particularly because the variation was quite great because the stone was coming from different quarries.
So once again, what we did is we went through there, and they only had a shop that is the size of this room to cut. Everything else had closed down, and we went by and walked out there and said, could we take pieces of the different stones and could we cut them in an economical way, and essentially clad the building with this stone. We didn't know where the 6 different quarries came from, but we just wanted to make sure it was a collage. And we then needed to find a systematic way to put them on the building, and talk once again about reasonable sizes to be able to lay, reasonable sizes to cut. And here, then we dry laid the facades in a gymnasium, and this is one of the facades that's dry laid. We played with a few of the stones, largely like just exactly how they came out.
And so that helped the contractors because it let the stone dry out, they numbered them, and then they put them up on the walls. So the building is really meant to be like really sort of marbles, low walls in the landscape, not have a huge presence. Later have a stronger presence when you go inside. So they're quite modest.
This is a meadow that grows quite tall. And you can see the tops are all dead level, but the land slopes away, so they meet the ground at different elevations slightly. Creates a sort of sense of courtyard and a sense of place, actually using the excavated boulders from the site and creating a kind of courtyard within the courtyard. We thought of this a place like the UN or like an operating theater, and then worked on this to be an intimate but very, very efficient theater. And so it is. We designed, of course, all the cabinet work, sound absorbent material on the walls, battens and walnut and so on. All the woodwork was done by a small cabinet shop in Long Island City. And it's used, it takes about 100 people.
So that's Liz Coleman, who just stepped down as the president of Bennington, but she's leading a seminar, so it can be quite intimate. And you can choose to sit on the sidelines and just listen, or you can easily participate. One of the great things also was sort of seeing the ability of some of the larger blocks. So we took some of the larger blocks and just used them whole. So you can see the marks that were made in order to pull them out of the ground. We also understood that because they were cutting in a very primitive way, the precision of the dimensional stone was not precise. So we then allowed the stone to, pushing it back the same dimension, but because the thickness varied,
We
and
took
the
it
base
straight
of the
off the
stone
blade,
varied.
so you see the saw mark still. And made very tight spaces, and then accentuated some of those differences. The courtyard in the center where you catch water or snow is the idea. It's kind of also an outdoor seminar space, as it is when it's raining. And then this is the residences where we brought the wood in. Every room was intended to be a little different, so when you come back, you would enjoy going to their room and then work with, well, they had some art there, Oliver's prints and so on. Did all of the furnitures inside of it. Intimate. Everyone a little different. In fact, found a person who had graduated from the school who did had his own tile making. He liked these funky tiles, so there are 6 rooms and there are 6 very different kinds of tiles for handmade.
And finally, this third building, which is an unprogrammed building, and it has no artificial light in it, but just this scoop that brings light in during the daytime.
The framing of the building, stone floor, actually slightly heated, and then a hand crank that opens the roof. And it's become a very, very sort of special and revered place for small gatherings, for music, for occasional seminars. Are we on 4? No. Jesus. Yeah, 4. Okay, moving along. This is another project. This is in Hong Kong. The red dot indicates where it is. It's called the Asia Society Hong Kong. It was a 10-year project for us. Again, we won this in a competition. I hate competition.
So the site was in downtown Hong Kong. It's called Central. But it used to belong to the British government, then belonged to the Chinese government. And it was actually British barracks, some of which date from Victorian times, which were abandoned. And then there are some people who were sort of camping out there. So the program was to create a cultural center as an outpost of the Asia Society, which is based in New York. So these were the buildings as we first saw them. And this is Todd's drawing, which shows that when the British came, they created a plateau and they located these buildings on this flat plain.
These are the 3 buildings, 1, 2, 3, and there's a berm, an artificial berm between each of them because they were making munitions up here, and if this thing exploded, they didn't want this building to explode. And then they cabled those munitions down to the water side. So
Which used to be a lot closer.
We basically restored these buildings and made connections and added one horizontal building. And this, the idea behind this was a horizontal building in a vertical city, or a Chinese kind of, a new Chinese garden. So this is the roof of the one building we made, and that is exactly co-planar with that platform up here. And in Hong Kong, as we'll tell you, in India, there are huge monsoons and very big storms, and we wanted to make sure, and a lot of heat too, and we wanted to make sure that people could walk through the site without having outdoors and always be protected, but it had to be completely accessible.
There's a channel of water which becomes very, very full at certain times, which separates the upper site from the lower site. So that was the model, and this is actually the building itself after it was constructed. So it's quite close to the model. You can see that the bridge kind of cranks around. Our earlier idea was that it would go straight, but it turned out there were endangered bats in some of the trees. So the bridge bent, but it's also kind of a relationship with Chinese bridges and gardens crossing over water, because if you go in a straight line, then the evil spirits can go in. So if you go in a bent line, supposedly they get stuck in the corners. So this is the upper site. There are 3 heritage buildings there. One was turned into a theater, one was turned into a gallery, and one was turned into a series of offices.
And you can see the tracks where the munitions would come, and we took them out and then restored them, and then would be cabled down to the water, and then this is the lower site. It's quite a complex project. We wanted to make sure none of the mechanical was visible. We wanted to respect the heritage stuff. This is actually an existing banyan tree that was there in a building from the 30s that we saved at our new wall that separates our building here. The one building we made from this building in the 30s that we restored, and the other building floats above it, separated by about 8 feet or so.
The stone is a stone from China, which has a very sort of green and almost kind of leafy quality to it. We felt that it was appropriate because it felt so much as if you were part of the jungle, even though you were in the middle of downtown Hong Kong. So on the other side of that wall that you just saw is the sense of the garden. So I think things that come back again are this desire to make a quiet space.
And also, as you step by there, you hear the roar of the water. So that Nola runs through here and you climb up over it on the cantilever, walk away, and then walk across this bridge on the top and the bottom. And the bottom bridge slopes at 1 and 20 and allows people to move in a loop right through the site. So here we are on the roof of the building. This idea of the double bridge, a lower bridge that's covered by the upper one, enabled us to bring all the services on the upper bridge from one side to the other.
This is looking back towards through the new building. And on the upper level, in Chinese gardens, there are also these sort of arcades that cover you. So it's a kind of variation in that arcade, taking you from one building to another. The restoration of one of the heritage buildings as an office.
Restoration of the berms. We didn't have to insulate these buildings. This is the berm that's restored. When it was first made, it didn't have trees on it. We left the trees, and then this is the building that has 8-foot thick walls, and that becomes the gallery. We then cut through another berm to walk from one building to the next, trying to make sure that we didn't interrupt the presence of the buildings alone.
So this is the second heritage building, third heritage building, the theater. It's looking back to downtown Hong Kong. So our primary facade is really the horizontal facade. So this was a project that's now lasted about 10 years also. But it first happened when we got a message in the message book saying that somebody from India had come to talk to us about a project in Mumbai. And the project was to make a campus, a kind of software campus, in an area that was actually quite wooded and that therefore quite rare in Mumbai. And on that far image, you can see that
This is the project under construction. Our idea was to save every tree. We, of course, couldn't do that. There were heritage buildings there. We then spent a good deal of time in India trying to convince them that we would only use Indian methods and only Indian materials. We found that cashmere white stone, which we liked very much and was affordable, was available only in Madurai, which is in the very south.
But as you can see, sometimes things are quite sophisticated, and other times they're quite unsophisticated. So we are still working on this project, and probably have another 3 or 4 years to go. But we were very, very impressed by these Indian step wells. So that they are amazing pieces of architecture that have no presence above ground, but really only become richer and richer as you walk down and go down to the bottom where the water used to be.
So that was one of the influences. The other one was to look at Lunkan and of course, Le Corbusier. This is up in, both of these were up in Ahmedabad. And we were totally blown away by Khan's work here and the power of monumentality and yet the handmade quality. Well, this was a long time ago, and we weren't able to use the same bricks or anything like that, nor did we really want to. Instead, we used the stone and we used mock-ups. These were mock-ups to help to explain our idea, much as Khan did, and we would make full-scale mock-ups. They would see that, for example, the stairs were not lining up in any way. It was an attempt for even stairway. We said, oh, we'll remake it. So they remade the whole thing. They got it right.
So this overall site plan shows this kind of strategy, these buildings fingering out into the landscape because the land rises up at the far corner. And the buildings that you'll see are the buildings that are constructed. The ones outside of the dotted red lines are the buildings that are under construction. So those buildings that are constructed, an entry canopy.
Still being finished right now. Drop off under the canopy, you park all the cars below grade. The roofs are made with both a membrane and then the added membrane of China tile, which is a tradition in India. When you walk out from the garage, you look at the ceiling of the canopy.
This is an entrance courtyard and then an elevated walkway. So here we were looking at the carved stone jollies that are in Rajasthan and used both old technology and new technology to make these stone panels which line this elevated walkway.
So this is a structural C. The air ventilates through here. And then there are two pieces of stone, one that is 7 feet long here, and another, well, actually it's 6 feet long, another that's 7 or 8 feet long here, and they're just 2 1/4 or 60 mm thick. So this is the walkway that allows you to walk through from one building to the next. The men who were carving it, when we went up to Jessen, we saw that it was unbelievably inexpensive. They would carve one of these pieces of stone from both sides, as we asked them to do, and it was $300 a panel. They now are using CNC, but they still finish the panels by hand. That allows us to look into the landscape and the sketches.
We try to cut the buildings into the ground, and so these very large constructed rooms, maybe thinking about what was going on in Hong Kong, happen between and around the buildings to both protect them from the sun and keep the glare down for people working on screens.
What is great is that there are now more than 2,000 people working there, and they're working on computers, and none of them use shades. They all can look directly into this landscape or walk into the landscape. Again, this is not finished. The landscape we did ourselves, so we carved rooms into the landscape using basalt and made different paths between the buildings so that you would always walk out in unconditioned but covered spaces between the buildings.
And as well, they're unconditioned but covered spaces that are all circulation spaces. So everything you saw in red was the outdoor space.
And every stair is a fire stair.
And circulation spaces are also social spaces.
Meals are conducted out here, and meetings are conducted out here. These are hammered copper. We call them candles. And then actually the workstations have large glazed areas that look into shadowed spaces.
We worked with women who weave, and in a collective they were able to weave these pieces in their own villages, and they're very large versions of a kind of E-cut pattern. And you also see there are these light screws that penetrate through the buildings and bring that light down to the covered courtyards.
And we convinced them they should have a swimming pool, probably a dumb idea, but that also would be covered actually by a concrete roof, stone clad on the inside and outside, and floating into the landscape is still not completed. And then this is the next phase is now under construction. And so we have 2 phases that are going to happen right after another.
This is our final project. It just opened in December, and in many ways it's a very exciting project for us because it's probably the most public project because it's in the middle of Prospect Park.
And if you know these 2 parks, you know Central Park very well. This is Olmsted and Roxton. And Prospect Park, you can see Prospect Park was done a little later than Central Park, and in an irregular shape. And Olmsted and Rox believed in this one because it had a 1.25 mile long meadow and had a much bigger forest and it had a much bigger lake. This is our project, which is 23 acres of Prospect Park, and this is the Olmsted and Vox drawing where this portion of the park is considered recreational. They had a concert grove, they had something called Music Island, they had a carriage concourse and boats on the water and skating and so on. It was sort of the poorer part of the park, much more about recreation. And it stayed that way, but fell into terrible disrepair, and they created an ice skating rink in 1965.
So they filled in part of the lake where you see people skating, and they put this ice skating rink on it, and then they took the carriage concourse and they put asphalt on it and turned it into a parking lot.
So this is what we were confronted with. Our idea was to try to return, and this is basically a plan of the building under construction, making 2 rinks, one undercover, another one an oval rink, and then to basically bury these buildings and restore Music Island. So Music Island has been restored, Concert Grove is restored, the water's edge is restored, and our building sits exactly in the footprint of the 300-car lot. But this didn't work out right away. We got ourselves into trouble.
So we had a much bigger, much more shaped building that was under huge amount of landscape. And we were over budget.
So, you're over budget, and they said, we love your project, but we can't fund it. And they agreed for a nominal fee we could go back. And instead of trying to save this, we just ditched it. And,
but it was, so we had still a kind of free-form rink. We had a rink that was under this big green building. The building or constructed landscape really extended much, much further. Was a complex shape.
Yeah.
Was concrete.
We called the first one, Billie did this drawing, she called the first one the leaf. And when we decided to simplify it, we went pretty simple.
So,
I think on a redesign, if you're over budget, you can either try to take one of those tips off the leaf, or you just say, whoops. So, this project came in on budget, maybe a little below budget, and served virtually. They lost a little bit of the programs to storage facilities. This is the model. This is a green roof, and then we have an oval rink connected to a rink that's made for hockey, and those two things can be separate or connected. And in the summertime, this is water play continuously, and this is roller skating under this canopy. All of the mechanical is hidden in the berm, then is really going to conceal most of the buildings. The plans.
so this is Laurentian green granite from Canada, and it's simply chopped. So we're taking it as it comes directly from the quarry. And if you have been in Central Park, you've seen these very, very big walls. We wanted, once again, to have the building feel as if it's part of the landscape. So you're walking past these rounded walls.
And up along the rounded walls, and this is the two buildings, which are both rectangles that are partially covered in soil and have a bridge between where you get to rent. The only thing you pay for actually is getting on the ice. The rest of the facility is entirely free, and it's free all summer long. And then the rink is cut. We have a long tile wall here with about 4 seasons, once again, using the key tile and then the ceiling, which both gives proper illumination and for the hockey and for ice skating.
So this is what you see above is an earlier experiment with Keith's tile, trying to get them to paint on the glaze. And when we realized we were over budget, what you see below are the standard tiles that they have in their regular collection. And so we decided we would just vary the color of the standard tiles to make this long wall.
But it's immediately kind of a hit, I'm pleased to say. You put your skates on outside, there's an area inside, all of the window wall is made of stainless steel, and so it'll be quite durable. The roof has a constellation that is irregular and regular. This is in fact the exact ice size of the Boston Garden, former Boston Garden, so it's a good rink for hockey. We played with the idea of a structure. This is even still screwing around the structure, even if we made it a rectangle. And I'm glad we could do this. Taking the idea of the marks on ice and applying it to the ceiling as a kind of graphic, which appears to have lights but doesn't. It's just carved into the, so it's the drawing of that. And then the lights are it's an earlier version where everything is irregular. And the final version is this.
So here you can see you're on the upper level, and you ascend the upper level without even knowing that you're going up there, because the earth is sort of burned up, so the pathways are simply walking up almost a gentle hill, and then you find yourself there and you look down.
The structure cantilevers the corners and is asymmetrical so that one frees the corners from the side. And basically, this is a continuous ring beam and bar trusses that run across a very, very cheap structure. And as it looked in late fall, we're still under construction as it looks in the wintertime, with the, once again, an Olmsted box tree from 1887.
So, we end this lecture with hands, or sort of the hands that we trace, our own hands. the hands of people that make the buildings that we design. And actually, it's also hands that are reaching back to sort of take the hands of the people before us and reaching out to take the hands of the people that come after us. I feel like we're incredibly lucky to be doing what we're doing, and we, as Tod said in the very beginning, feel incredibly fortunate to be associated with this great school and to have you all here with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Very nice. These two young guys took it up, stayed through the whole thing. We had changed before, right? Thank you. We're happy to take some questions that people would like to ask you. We also understand that you've got stuff to do. Every question is a question. Really are. Stay as long as you like. But also understand that you want to go. If you do, you just have to ask it very loud.
Oh no. Closing this up.
Way in the back. Yes, any question?
I'm just a couple of years out of school, 1 year into an architecture office, and I'm seeing that the business of architecture is not easy in itself. And I look at what you guys are doing, and you're more than that. You're architects that are in the business of beauty. And I'm wondering, how do you do that? And really though, how do you build a business around making beautiful things?
Well, I think actually it's right to admit we're in the business of beauty, but we're in the business of being practical too. And I think that's talking with the students we serve, and many of these projects started out in a kind of awkward way, and we just continue to serve and realize that it is a collaboration with the site, with the client, and with the studio. And I would say that, you know, Billie's 64 and I'm 70, it didn't happen right away. You're just, it's a great long life. And I would say, you know, watch how your life will develop and how rich it can be. And I think that a huge amount is just simply enjoying the work.
But I thought one of the things you said today at lunch was interesting because we started out doing the kitchens and the bathrooms, and when Tod pointed to the light switches on the wall, and he said, well, if I had the opportunity to arrange the switches in the most beautiful way. It was to serve that person, but it was also to do something very special for myself. That beautiful arrangement of light switches. So the smallest detail, I think, becomes a way that you find beauty and you serve. And so even, I think, in every project, there's some place where you can do something that is for yourself as well. And I thought that was a really good way of talking about how you develop your vision. You may be needing to deal with many practical things, but there must always be that thing which gives you joy.
And it's not a secret, you have to tell the client. I believe this is a painting, this set of switches, but I want it to be a practical painting. I want you to be intuitive when you come in. The light switches to the right switch. We stay away from three-way switches and so on and so forth. And I want the guy that's going to build it to think, as he's putting the studs up, that we're going to line up those boxes and then we're going to line up the faces. And that was the stuff we enjoyed doing then. And that was about all there was for a few years. And it does get bigger, it does get better. But you have to let them know that this touches me. You know, I'm lucky. Organize your switches. I want to do more than organize your switches too for people. you know, we want to do more, but if that's all we can do, that's what we're doing. And I think that that's really an attitude that has helped us over the years. Another.
I really like the beauty of materials in your work. So how do you think the imperfection and randomness in the construction process, and how do you think the artisans and manufacturers should be involved in the design process?
Well, you know, there's a lot of strategy in all this stuff. You don't come with a preconception of the size of the stone you're going to use. You talk to the guy who's going to build it and say, how much can one person pick up? How thick can we lay? You go to the quarry and you see that they're cutting very thin blades and they're getting 3/4 inch thick stone or even thinner stone, but they break a lot of that crap. You know, say, oh, how about 2 inch thick? Well, okay, that's okay. Who's going to move it? Well, who's going to move a 4x8 panel of 3/4 inch stone anyway? You're not going to do it. So you begin to understand how you cut the stone, and you want to use, you realize that so many people are using only the best stone and the best wood, and you use more of the stone as long as it's sound. And so it's just a continuous sort of interrogation of some of the things, not all of the things that you're doing, because you can't interrogate everything, but you have to let their voice come forward, and when they're happy, usually the price comes out, drops down. Always make sure there's a little competition, don't fall off with one piece of stone, because we're another portion of the quarry, another quarry across the street. You want to keep that as long as you can. You certainly don't allow too many people to mark up the pieces, and you know, it's a little like the light switches. You just get into it, and everybody should get into it. I can't. Oh, there's a couple.
The Hong Kong project, when you had to make a revision to the bridge to avoid the bats habitat, it seemed like you were really able to sort of insert the work within the flora without really disturbing anything. Was there anything specific that you had to do construction-wise to allow that to happen?
Yeah. This was our idea. That land that it went through didn't belong to the client, but once they marked the land, they were responsible for it forever. So one of our strategies was, okay, how infrequent can the columns be? Well, that was one idea. And the other one is, what else can we do with this bridge? How can we make sure that the services go through it and you can pick up a piece of stone and, you know, get the services in this corner?
So I don't think that
there was some damage, but it quickly grows back, I should say.
Right.
It's almost instant jungle.
Right, and I don't think that the bend caused a huge change.
They liked it. They thought it was cool. I thought it was a little gestural, personally. I mean, I think it's a little aggressive, a little, a little over the top.
Yeah, but you do.
But they,
That's
I don't know.
That's a good.
That's it's a photo op, I didn't love the idea because we was worried about the budget, but, oh my God, if you make me do it, I'll do it. Okay. Some of these things are really burdens.
There's one back there.
So your first question was about beauty, and then you answered your question immediately following about tectonic or technique. Do you consider yourself an artist, and how do you balance the role between being a craftsman and being someone that creates beauty?
We're not.
Yeah, we're neither the craftsmen nor are we artists.
I just don't, it's true we're interested in beauty, but again, it's the issue of trying to say that we're primarily there to serve. And we are interested in beauty, and we are interested in warmth. We're interested in being happy.
We're interested in the people that are actually making the things that we...
And yeah, we're interested in beauty. We'd like something amazing to happen. But it can't happen everywhere. So you can see, for example, in Bennington, we were really making a mess of that thing, honestly. And the first Prospect Park thing, way over the top. They were encouraging us, we were encouraging ourselves, and we got ourselves into a giant mess. And you have to say, I sort of fucked up. And, can you give me a little bit more fun fees, because maybe you helped me get screwed up there too. And so you negotiate a very low fee to get back on track. And they think you're a hero. Carolyn, whatever. You got to suck it up. It's a bad situation.
You what are you talking about?
Let me answer that question.
But you asked her, do we consider ourselves artists? And I think that we are part of that team that is searching for beauty. And that's not to say that we are giving up a sense of authorship, but we can only do work when somebody wants us to do work. And so I think that's the difference, because we're not generating things ourselves because we want it to be that way. We're generating things in response to other people's needs. That's a big difference.
Here's something to know. Okay. Nobody thinks of reflected ceiling plans. That nobody, you get the light down right, you've got to, nobody's walking on that surface. You know, you can have a whole lot of fun up there.
You have emphasized the importance of collaboration with your clients. As you reflect over the last 25 years, the work that you have been doing, do you see that collaboration being easier? Your clients are becoming, do you think that they're becoming more sophisticated and able to engage in the dialogue that you sharing with them, or is it getting worse? Is it getting better, equal, worse? What is your assessment over the, your career?
It's like you learn from having a bad relationship, what to look out for. And so I know that in the beginning, we've all had our sort of bad relationships, whether they're personal or whether they're with clients. And certainly one of the things about practicing for a while is your antenna go up and you know when you should say no. And no can really save you. So I think what we do is we look for clients that have a kind of a level of aspiration. They both have a need, but they would like to go somehow beyond that need. And that's where we can be.
I think it's sort of the same. I mean, I think we both were married before. I mean,
it's like a little too much information.
I'm just telling you, you also can be a better architect. You know, it's not just about the clients being better, it's about you being better and being a better person to relate to. I think that's something that's come along. I feel like I'm, more respectful of the client. Yeah.
Two questions. You have a project of which you're most proud. And then the second question is, how collaborative is it within the office in terms of the initial concepts beyond the detailing and so forth?
Not too collaborative. Not too collaborative. The first collaboration is here. We need to have some sort of idea that we feel okay with. We often don't agree. So that's a really critical collaboration. And then to have a germ of an idea that we can talk about with somebody else in the studio. Right?
Yeah, I think the other question is, what is the project of which you feel most proud?
It's like asking if you've got children, you don't do that. And we don't. I've got 3, and I don't do it. I'm deeply wounded by the Folkart situation because we gave our absolute all in that, and it should not be destroyed. But you know, you lose a brother, you lose a parent, you get on with it. I don't have favorites. Millie, she's got favorites.
We should probably just do another question or so. One more question, and then we'll let you escape.
Thank you.
We heard you talk about your work. How do you view each other?
That's a good ending question.
I'd like to think Billy's a doormat. No. Don't say that ever. No, I think how do you view each other? She's the wise one, let's be clear about that. And she has the judgment understanding of beauty. And so those are really important things.
I think I'm not sure I would be an architect if I hadn't gone to work for Tod. I know he pushes me beyond where I want to go. He has always pushed me beyond my comfort zone, and I think in that way I continue to grow. So he helps me continue to grow, even though I often hate it.
But she helps steer the mission. So we know who's in control.
Thank you very much.